to Nonfiction Radio, New Jersey's #1 online radio station. Listen live at nonfictionradio.com or download the Nonfiction Radio app on your phone or Android device. Follow us on Twitter, IG, Facebook, and Snapchat at Nonfiction Radio. Lock us in to call on the hotline, 973-536-1165. That's 973-536-1165. For booking info, nonfictionbooking@gmail.com. Now, back to your regularly scheduled program.
Good afternoon to all our viewers around the world. This is Nonfiction Radio, and the program we have today is Maximum Impact. And this week we're going to discuss a very, very important aspect of life, which is called loneliness. I think loneliness is very important because we've come to a situation whereby we see there's many lonely people within the church, and that includes pastors, priests, and loneliness comes because of an isolation and for lack of identification and poor communication. And I believe this is very important because we find that people have become vulnerable and they're not honest with one another, and we tend not to understand this. So we want to look into it today. And I'm very happy I have a very important guest here that is very vast. He's very vast. He's by the name of Dr. Egesionu, and he's the author of a book titled Quality of Life and a Step of Excellence Toward Total Quality, which was published by the PAC Group. In his introduction to his book, he defined the quality of life as a degree of need and satisfaction within the physical and psychological, social, activity, material, and structural area. And it is subjective to evaluation of good and satisfactory characters of life as a whole. So he's very vast on the topic, and we're going to be talking about this subject called loneliness. But first and foremost, let Dr. Egesionu greet everybody. Dr. Egesionu, you're welcome to the show once again.
Hello, friends and family.
Right, so to kick off, Dr. Egesionu, can you give us an introduction of what you perceive as loneliness?
Thank you, Obi. There is a relationship between what we define as quality of life and loneliness as a factor determinant of quality of life. It's complex to give one simple definition of what loneliness is, but we can look into it when we bring it down as a part of living, essence of living. I have considered a couple of references to tie it down to my definition of quality of life. We can look at loneliness as a mismatch of relationships we have and those we want. We can look at loneliness as an internal trigger telling us about what to seek, particularly socially. In this case, just as thirst tells us that we need to drink water,
Correct.
Hunger tells us that we need to eat something. Loneliness tells us that something is lacking in our social context, our social environment. We can look at loneliness further if we see it from the point of view of a state of mind. Maybe that is how psychologists will see it. But it's a state of mind that causes people to feel empty, alone, and even unwanted. So that makes it a little more
So,
dangerous.
so from your definition, we can be, even though we are around people, we can be lonely.
Definitely, according to experts, loneliness is not necessarily about being alone. Okay. Instead, it is the perception of being alone and isolated that matters most. So it's not the physical position that we define or that defines the impact of loneliness. Rather, the emotional and the psychological perception. Okay. And that is where it becomes complex, that there are situations where people are really lonely, that they don't know they are lonely. So that perception is observed by people observing them.
Like, for instance, when I started the show, I came up with I said that isolation comes through because of lack of communication.
Well, in this case, I will go back a little bit, or rather continue with the concept I was trying to define.
Mm-hmm.
We can as well see loneliness as the difference between the desired and the actual social relationship. And when we look at it in this way, then I can classify them into four different situations, but each of them can be interpreted as loneliness. One is living alone.
Mm-hmm.
Two is being alone. Three is isolation. And the fourth one is solitude. Now, why is it necessary to explain this? Because the quality of life we are living at the time, our perception of the quality of life we are living at the time, might be determined by which of these four quadrants you find yourself, or which of the four quadrants people are seeing you. Like I mentioned earlier, there are situations where people don't know that you're lonely, but you feel lonely. And there are situations where people think you're lonely, but you don't even know that you're lonely. And yet a third situation where you don't know you're lonely, and people don't know you're lonely. So that is where we start bringing in each of these quadrants of living alone, being alone, isolation, and solitude.
So I can tie these four concepts to a verse in the Bible. It's Psalm 27, verse 7. And David said, "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord received me." So invariably, loneliness can be a situation in which you find yourself in either of these four quadrants, and you have to reach out. Because when I look at a further verse in Deuteronomy 31 verse 6, it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you." So how can these four quadrants be relative to Christians, or be related to how the Word of God identifies?
I really like your analogy. That furthers more our understanding of loneliness. In the sense that loneliness is not always about your physical environment. Okay. It's how you react to that physical environment that defines if you are lonely or not lonely. And if I bring typical example into this, is right at Calvary, when Christ was hanging on the cross. Physically, he was not alone. He had two other persons hanging with him, standing on the same circumstance, facing the same fear of death. But he cried out to his Father the very moment he started feeling lonely, regardless of the people around him. Okay. That was the time he made the connection. Of course, usually the initial connection was that of fear, pleading if the yoke will be passed over him, but at the same time that of determination that he has a commitment with his father.
Okay. Hold that thought. We have a caller on the line. Let's just find out who it is. Hello, caller. Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hello, caller. You're through to Maximum
Hi,
Impact.
I would like to talk about a death of a recent celebrity.
You like to do what, sorry?
To talk about a death of a recent celebrity.
Okay.
It was
Sorry. Can you tell me your name, sorry, and where you're calling from, sorry?
Jeremiah.
Okay, hello, Jeremiah. Where are you calling from, Jeremiah?
Miller.
You're calling from where, sorry?
Nigger.
Hello? Call is dropped. Go ahead. Continue.
So that moment that he felt lonely is the definition that loneliness is not about the environment. It's about your emotional feeling. It's about the perception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That state of helplessness, hopelessness, neediness, that you believe that somebody has to come to your rescue. That is loneliness. It can be pathological. It can be also a choice. And that is where we start differentiating the quadrants. Like if we talk about solitude, that can be a choice when you want to be alone and have a moment of reflection towards something. Okay. Isolation, which might not be of a choice. Okay, another call.
Okay, one second. Another caller. Sorry about this. Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Caller, can you give us your name and where you're calling from, please?
My name is Israel. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Okay, Pastor Israel. What's your question?
Can I be to the line, please?
Sorry?
Oh, am I on the line now?
You're on the line, yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually enjoying the topic about loneliness, and and I'm so happy that I had Dr. The guest. He was talking about the importance of the four dynamics of the four dynamics of loneliness. I mean, but it struck me when you try to define loneliness as perception. That means somebody can have people around him or her and still be lonely, and then someone can also be alone and not be lonely. Can you try to put on that again? I really want to hear more about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Israel. The quadrants, just to reiterate for our audience, is living alone, being alone, solitude, and isolation. Each of these may be perceived differently from the person, the victim of loneliness, or people that are interested on the lonely person. Perception comes in. And what I'm trying to explain there is somebody can be living alone, and the people around will think that that person is lonely, but the person is not feeling lonely. He's not perceiving that loneliness. Maybe because he or she has things engaging him, fulfilling his life, is very assertive, somebody that is assertive. And there are other situations where somebody is being alone, which can be a temporary condition. temporary situation. That person is alone at that moment. And there could be a state of anguish and fear of how long am I going to be alone? What do I do? Who is watching and not who is not watching? So again, whichever of these two, it becomes perceptive because of the way you're going to react. Your reaction is what defines loneliness, not actually the situation you find yourself. And in the case of isolation and the solitude, solitude is a choice. Isolation may be of will or out of will. But again, your reaction in any of these quadrants is what determines loneliness.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You know, when I first came to the United States, you know, I came by myself, you know, and I met you, and there was something, even though I had people around me at that specific period of time, I was always coming to see what form of I was lonely because I was brought out of my comfort zone and I had already come into this new environment. But the point I'm trying to understand here was that, or I'm trying to get viewers to understand, even though I had people around me, I had my friends who you know, and I had you, but you made it a point of interest to continue to engage me. Was that because you felt I was lonely? Or was it because of the fact that you were just being who you were?
Obi, don't make this personal. I have not written this book by that time. I think your situation is a situation of God using me to fulfill his will for you. So I don't take credit for that.
Okay.
If you have any credit to take or to give to any person, challenge God to create similar situations where you can do even more to other people as I did to you. That's all I can say. But when we come down to types of loneliness, which I would discuss separately, you will find out that number one situation of loneliness is new to a situation, which can happen because you migrated to a new country, a new place, or a new job, as the case might be. We have also, I am different. When you find yourself in an environment where you think you don't belong, you're different.
Difference
like
in the sense that you are unique
in
or
our job, yes.
You're unique or
yes.
you are...
Yes, but I rather come into that when we come to that
so what are the
stage of our
So what are the
conversation.
characteristics of loneliness?
Loneliness, like I mentioned, has manifest in different forms. Okay, there are some of them that is hereditary.
Really?
People are surprised when I talk about it that way, because most persons say I'm shy. So they go for a function, a party or something, and they barely can talk to any person. But they are there. They are lonely just because they are shy and timid.
Is that not just failure to what's the term? To interact?
To be social?
Is that not a social maladjustment?
That is your perception. But the reality is that the person is reacting to his loneliness, his shyness. Okay. And that is why a lot about the characteristics can be tied down to your level of assertiveness, what we call level of confidence in yourself. And that was why I mentioned earlier that there are situations where people think you're lonely, but you don't see yourself lonely because you're comfortable at the situation you are. Okay, you are assertive. Another characteristics of loneliness is associated with a high level of stigma or stereotyping about the elderly. Okay. I'm yet to prove if this is a fact or a myth. Statistically, it appears a good number of elderly people seem to be lonely or living alone. Okay. But I am also perceiving that the young people, particularly this generation, the millennials, are also victims of loneliness. That is why they hide their loneliness on the use of the media. And that is the dangerous side of this epidemic of loneliness, because they seem to socialize, but they are not physical in their socialization. So they spend their time looking for association that is never real association. Okay. And that is why when we talk about types of loneliness, I mentioned the type I call, where is my phone? Okay. I don't know if you've been in that situation where you missed your phone for 3 minutes and you feel like your world has ended, right? Because of our high dependence on thinking that the only way we can cope with boredomness or fulfill our life in a moment is flicking at our phone. And unfortunately, this is also affecting Christians. A lot of us as Christians are spending more time in the media than the time we spend worshiping, mediating, and praying even for others. When we think that everything is okay for us, we spend more time in the social media. So all those come in as some of the characteristics. And then another characteristic that is very, very common with associated with loneliness is when we tune it up a little more, anxiety.
Exactly. I was going to call it anxiety because it's very good that you called anxiety, because the Bible says, according to 1 Peter 5-7, it says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you."
Okay, I'm happy you brought it up. So, what do you think happened when Christ kept repeating about His departure and preparing the disciples to take over? What do you think was the chaos among the disciples?
I think that one of the keys of the chaos was that they couldn't fathom the idea of him going. You know?
Academics in divinity think that is the struggle for leadership. It's not. It's the fear of being alone without Christ that has been the figure, the image of their fulfillment.
But like in a situation where they found themselves in, this was the Son of God who'd come into his positioning, his purpose was being fulfilled, and he was presenting a new philosophy. He brought a new dynamic.
That remember that majority of the disciples followed Christ's teaching literally. Okay, it's like you're in a chemistry lab and an experiment is being performed about osmotic pressure or solubility, solvents, and you just like what the teacher is doing, but you cannot relate it to how it's applied. That when a medication is given to you, that it has to dissolve and you absorb it into your body for your body to react and for it to do what it's doing. So the disciples didn't really understand what he meant by that he will go, he will come, and all the things that he was talking in parables. And Christ knew about that. That was why he kept reassuring them. Almost like, do nothing, I will send you somebody. Okay, the Holy Ghost. Okay. And when finally the Holy Ghost came in the Pentecost day, and they realized that, oh, this is the person that Christ was talking about, they regained confidence, and evangelism took momentum.
So confidence surpasses anxiety?
Obi, did you ever cry when you were a baby because your auntie came, your cousin came, or your father was traveling and you went to see that person off and you started crying at the airport or at the train station or somewhere, and we don't know why you're crying, but you cried stubbornly?
I don't think I was. I don't think I was in those type of situations.
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did. At least I remember very well when I was leaving Nigeria for the first time at the airport. Even with the joy that I was leaving and everything, that I was going to overseas, I still cried. And I remember the first 3-4 hours into the flight, I couldn't eat, I couldn't do anything. I was feeling anxious and nauseous and so on. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the loneliness. When I was sitting inside that big aircraft and knowing very well that I've taken off, I'm off the ground, and that the challenge is never come back to Nigeria until you get your degree. So the loneliness set in, but in manifesting as anxiety or the fear of unknown. So that's another characteristics. Another characteristic of loneliness, which is the extreme characteristics, is depression. Okay, which is very common and can come in different disguise. Of course, that leads to other behavior issues, other addictions like alcoholism, drug addiction, and you name it.
So all
People
of these,
develop other habits trying to fulfill themselves instead of as a way of reacting to that emptiness called loneliness.
so this loneliness has an impact on our quality of life.
They are directly related. That was why I defined it as one of the determinants of quality of life.
And the impact. So could we say that we shouldn't judge a book by the cover? Because, for example, we now, I think, like for the past 4 to 5 weeks, we've been talking about different aspects. We've talked about the changes in the church and the bedfellows. We've talked about depression. We've talked about veterans. We've even talked about how people disguise their depression. So, when you talk about the quality of life, we talked about people, like depression that has led to people's deaths. So all these artists that are overdosing, committing suicide, is it based on loneliness? Even though they have a quality of life?
As Christians, no, I wouldn't just blame it on loneliness. Remember again, the problem is not loneliness. The problem is how we react to our perceived situation of loneliness.
Like, because there was I think there's a lady that tried to commit suicide a couple of weeks ago. I forgot her name, and I think one of the things she was saying is that she said she was lonely. And the funny thing was that she had from the outside perception, she had a very good quality of life. She wasn't suffering from various things. Oh, I can't. Let me not say that because I may be judging, but maybe she was not suffering from the core factors that some people suffer. But she still said she was that when she leave the crowds, even with her groups, anonymous groups, when she closes that door, and despite everything that is within her, she'd fall into that state.
Okay, I'm still being very careful to leave the diagnosis of depression and the characteristics of depression to professionals to handle, psychologists and psychiatrists. But as an ordinary person, let me fit it into my quadrant concept. Okay. As Christians and as human beings, we have the 4 windows. Okay. One is how we are. Another one is how we want people to see us. Another one is how people sees us. And the last one is how people want to see us. Now, we have these 4 windows, and we just perceive ourselves in any of those 4 windows. And any contradictions of those 4 windows can trigger a behavior in us. And that behavior will be interpreted by other people or by us. So that is the complexity of the concept of loneliness. But again, as a Christian, our problem there, when we come down to coping with loneliness, becomes to what extent do we leave a lot of things for God to solve? And to what extent do we assume the empowerment to deal with those issues ourselves? I'm also being very, very careful about that, because I don't want to talk about complacency of Christianity. But sometimes we leave a lot of things in the hand of God, when God has given us the hands and the empowerment to deal with those issues.
I totally agree with you there, because I do think that it's just like, as my pastor was saying a few weeks ago, it's like the on and off switch, you know? Okay. Switch the switch. If you switch it on, the light comes on. You switch it off, the light goes off. There are some situations in which the technology has, or the answer to your solution is just about switching on and switching off a switch.
Exactly. Your reaction.
You know, but I think when we come to this part of loneliness, you know, I just think that the educative awareness of Christians today is very woeful. I use that word very, very mildly, but I think it's very woeful, because the fact is that even though God is a God that supplies all our needs, there are some certain basics that God has already done. And I think that's what Bishop Hans was talking, that I just think that we're falling in, we don't understand the, that we've already passed those, we've circumnavigated those situations. And I think therefore they are in those situations because of lack of ignorance.
Well, that takes us to the 5th characteristics of loneliness. Okay. Loneliness can be a cultural phenomenon, because how people react to living alone, being alone, isolation, or situations of anxiety varies from culture to culture. So I think this is giving me an opportunity to bring in that other characteristics, that our reaction to loneliness can be cultural. Okay. And another characteristic that I was still discussing is the aspect that loneliness can be transgenerational. Okay. Like from family to family, okay, the quality of relationship in a family from one generation appears to be diluted into the next generation.
Like a generational curse?
Obi, for example, the way you related to your cousins back home is not the way your children in America are going to relate to their cousins, because they are in a different generation. So the boundaries of relationship is being redefined with time, and we have to become cognitive of that. Okay. In the past, that you don't own a car may not stop you from doing your daily things. Now that you don't own a car can be interpreted as a cost. In the past, owning and riding a bicycle as your means of transportation may be a cost, because you're feeling like, oh, I don't have money to buy a car or motorcycle, that is why I have a bicycle. But now it's glamorous that you have a bicycle and you ride your bicycle every morning to work. So you are seen as somebody that is what? Green conscious,
Yes,
right?
yes, correct.
So this paradigm, sociological paradigm shifts, okay, impact the way we react to the concept of loneliness as a characteristic. Now, one of the last aspect of these characteristics that I want to bring in is also the aspect that loneliness as a social phenomenon can be learned or unlearned. People learn to act lonely, maybe to get attention. Just as people will fake to be poor to get social benefits. Or just as people will fake to be rich to attract a lot of friends. So, loneliness as a social phenomenon, one of the characteristics is that we learn how to either act lonely or deal with loneliness or react to loneliness. So that aspect of learning, the pedagogy of loneliness is something that is very, very interesting as one of the characteristics.
You are a lecturer in established universities within the United States, and you do come into contact with different types of students, with different behavioral concepts and behavioral aspects. Have you come into situation with your students in which you identify them as being lonely, and how do you deal with them?
This is where I would say God bless America. This country is doing a lot more than many other countries. We are taught consciously as faculty to have an eye on students and to be cognitive of diversity. What that means is that we have not only a moral obligation to observe students, but also a legal obligation to identify when a student is beyond the norms and boundaries of social presence, either in your class or outside the classroom. And then it becomes your own discretion to know if you want to talk to the students on one-on-one, or you just want to refer the students to counselors who are there for them. This is where I would be devil's advocate in this case, that the system provides structure to support students in different situations. That people take it for granted and don't take advantage of it is a different thing. Maybe because it's there as a part of the system, so people don't care. But I wish in some other places, including my own motherland, Nigeria, that our universities cared, or that we have something like that in the system, or that the professors will even ever care to identify that students go through these anxieties and that the way they react one and another in the same situation are different, and that your responsibility as faculty is not to be judgmental, okay, but to be empathetic and supportive until the student succeeds. That is the role. You're there as an educator to support them until they succeed, and not to be judgmental.
I want to take you back to something to the characteristics, the topology of loneliness. You brought about cultural. You brought culture into it, and you do know that the culture that we come from is a chauvinistic culture in which any form of these types of isms like loneliness, anxiety, and all these isms is frowned upon. And when an individual comes into a state or comes into a place in which look, he could be lonely. He fails to identify it, you know, and he becomes either he tries other means in which you were talking about, trying to be rich, trying to gain it, or trying to act this to attract people. How do we, or how do we lift the lid of these cultural stigmatisms about these forms of loneliness or this quality of which impacts our quality of life?
Uh, Again, I'm being very careful when it has to do with culture to be judgmental, because culture is culture. We cannot come out and say it's bad or come out and say it's excellent. Maybe the only time we will embrace a perfect culture is when we go to heaven, because that is meant to be perfect.
Correct.
Okay. The way I look at it, particularly if we are looking at those of us from developing countries or Africa in particularly, our cultural context to loneliness, I associate it with our degree of social interdependency. And that brings me down to the characteristics of loneliness that is associated with shyness, neuroticism, depressive symptoms, self-esteem, the aspect of optimism or pessimism, the aspect of agreeability and non-agreeability. Okay, so let me look at it in this point that in Nigeria, as a child growing up, you are taught to act shy when you talk to the elderly people, even when you disagree with them. In America, we are taught to be assertive and say your mind, even when it may look foolish. Okay. What this means is that the way somebody in Nigeria that is being in isolation, okay, or that is being lonely because he disagrees with his friends or family members, will interpret loneliness is different from the way an American facing the same situation will interpret loneliness. So that is why I brought in culture as a great influence of driver of our understanding of loneliness, but at the same time being very, very careful that we are not going to blame it on culture, because culture can be very unique to a particular society. Okay. And to define loneliness in every culture is a question of context, the way we look at that culture and its context. But what is common is, yes, if you're shy, you're shy. If you're assertive, you're assertive. Okay. If you're a clashy person, that somebody that likes to argue too much, and because of that you're not pleasant, people don't want to stay around you, you are. If you're somebody that is talkative and the bully, and because of that people don't want to stay around you, you are. So whom you are is whom you are. All depends now on, after the event, the aftermath, how are you as an individual reacting to the consequences of your choices and behavior. That is loneliness.
Very nice. You spoke earlier about social media and loneliness, and you spoke about the as it being a part in which children today are falling heavily into, and I want you to highlight, give more in-depth understanding to the viewers at home what you mean by the social media and loneliness, and how it impacts kids, how it can impact kids, or how it is impacting kids, and what are we looking at? What is the degree of this? I would call it can I call it a cancer? Because I think it's beginning to erode the society. What is the impact?
this to me, it's more serious than just we are talking, because social media and its impact is universal. It has nothing to do alone with developed world or developing world. The impact might even be more dangerous in developing countries. It has nothing to do with rich and poor. Otherwise, the impact might even be more dangerous on poor people than on rich people. The common sense is this. Let's speak on Facebook. Okay. The original idea of Facebook was to get people together, keep the memories of people you know through pictures, images, right? And all other social media came in as a means of communication, networking, getting together. But is that what we have today? No. What we have today is that 3, 5, 6 people can stay in the same room for an hour or more, and they are not talking to each other, because every person is on his phone, okay, trying to connect with somebody that is not there physically with you. And then when you see that person face to face, you cannot even communicate again. You cannot talk. Okay, there is an epidemic in preschool up to primary school level that children about 20 years ago at the age of 2, 3 may be able to communicate in their spectrum of vocabulary. They may have up to 1,000 words, 2,000 words at age 3 as expected standard of vocabulary. Today, there may be 80% less than that level of vocabulary. Why? Because once a child cries, the mother hands over a cell phone or an electronic game. So the child will be there playing instead of communicating with the mother. The time the mother would have said, yes, son, what is wrong? This is called that is called that. It's not done. That togetherness, that closeness is no longer there, starting from the home. Okay. It extends even to work. Okay, you call somebody on the phone, and that person will tell you, shoot me an email on that. Send me a text message on that. Okay. I remember myself growing up like at college level, being able to memorize a phone that, say you run into a club and you meet somebody that you like, and the person will just say their 7 digits of phone, and you memorize it, and the next day you're able to call up that person and get the phone exactly. Now, if you meet somebody and you don't have your cell phone to put in that, all what we need to know now and keep in our brain is just our password. And even when we don't have our password, we don't know it, we click forget password, and we go back to our
You don't even need it. All we need is to use our thumb or our finger, and it will open it up.
So, either there is a paradigm change on the concept of socialization, which some of us are yet to agree on, or the world is yet to wake up on the consequence of the negative impact of social media. I'm not saying that social media is not good, it's still good, and we are enjoying all the goodness for Christ's sake, but we pretend that we are not noticing the negative impact. The negative impact is that people spend more time socializing with the unsociable and being alone once that apparatus is off their hand. So when we come to social media and things, we will talk about it more. That it's another way of saying that instead of using social media to promote social behavior, okay, we are using it to promote disengagement. We are using it to promote self-absorption. Okay, we are using it to deal with loneliness without knowing that we are lonely. And in most cases, we are using it to promote sadness.
Wow.
Unfortunately, because people say worse things, bully each other easier on the media than face to face.
Wow.
Okay. And those are the negative sides of it.
So the impact in the society, the impact to the society is, as much as it been having a positive effect, is equally having a negative effect, in the sense that we are now developing or turning out children, people that have poor communicative skills.
Definitely. And as a university professor, I can tell you that when we do surveys to adapt our curriculum to required skills for people to be able to get the job and stay on the job, okay, we find out that more and more what employers are looking for is communication skills. Okay. In as much as these students can write English, speak English, but the aspect of body language is what is keeping them out of the job. The aspect of politeness, dealing with people face to face, the aspect of being patient, okay, is keeping them out of job. I don't know if you've observed it, like you go to a store and you want to check out, and the cashier is more interested in checking the text message before he has eye contact with you, right? Including the aspect of driving and testing that is causing accidents. But an interesting phenomenon about this is that, you know it, I just came back from Cancun last week on my vacation. And I found something very interesting, that even at the nightclub, the younger generation, once you play a tune they like, every person just goes, oh! And they can only dance it for 15 seconds. They pull out their cell phone, they want to tap another person dancing, and send it to another person that is not there, instead of staying there and dancing and enjoying the moment. Yeah, have you noticed that people walk out from the church more often than they used to be in our generation, unless they are sleeping? Why do people get bored in the church? And this is America, where sermons don't go more than 20, 30 minutes. It's not in Nigeria, where pastors speak for 2 hours and expect us to be awake. Okay. But even for the 20 minutes here, people are already walking out. Why? The anguish that they have to check what is going on in the media.
You know, there's, I can remember, like, many years ago when I was, I traveled to Slovakia in that period of time. And in that period of time, there was, cell phones were like new, but I went into the mountains, and I spent like a week in the mountains, and my cell phone got no signal. So for 1 week, I was at myself. I had no cell phone. You know what the funny thing was? After the withdrawal symptom of maybe 1-2 days, I became very quiet. I didn't need my cell phone. Then when I hit the city on the 7th day, the noise I could hear, like everything was noisy, because when you're in a quiet place, everything is quiet. But the noise that was so deafening to my ears that I now said, wow, that you can use loneliness or solitude to rediscover aspects of you that are dead.
This is consistent with the experience I had 3 years ago. My son was involved in a Catholic retreat in the summer. That was 3 days or 4 days retreat. They went somewhere in the Poconos, and one of the conditions is that they will not have cell phone to go. So when the retreat was over, and I went to pick him up, and of course asked him, son, how was it? The first complaint is life without cell phone. That turned out to be the best experience of that trip. Okay. For us, the parents, they told us, they gave us the names of the mentors and the tour guides, and told us, these people will report to you if need be.
Wow.
But they are not going to get your child to talk to you. If there is any emergency, they will call you. If there's no emergency, you don't get any call. So it's another way of saying, yes, this is the phone numbers and names of the people that your children are going to be with, but don't call them. They will call you. So even for us as parents, it was like, who knows? I remember the first one day my wife will stay one side and I will stay one side, and we'll be looking at each other, and we felt lonely just because one child is out of the home, just because we cannot talk to that one child. Now, what I'm trying to say is that we are taking for granted the advantages of social media, okay, but at the same time, we are not being cognitive of the dangers of social media as an antisocial tool. That is just what I want to emphasize. So when we come to social media, the key points I always want to talk about is the excessive dependence on visual instead of factual relationship. The aspect of body language that is very, very essential in communication. Okay. The mask on shyness or boldness. Okay. The hypocrisy of face contact, that somebody can be hating and testing another thing that does not reflect the image, right? The aspect of that you get into a social environment and you don't even know how to break the ice and say hello to another person. The aspect that you can spend 3 hours in a church with somebody and the church is over and you don't remember that face because for the 3 hours you never had eye contact with somebody. Okay, your eyes is always on your phone whenever your eyes is not on the pastor or something. Okay, the distraction from the reality, because a lot of the things we see in the social media become interesting to us because they are virus. And why is they virus? Because they are out of the norm. Either that they are extremely good or extremely bad. And those are the things we remember. The aspect of replacing our brain, our memory, okay, replacing it with dependency on passwords and somewhere. So we are not stimulating our intellect enough. Okay. The aspect that we are becoming more and more on the consuming side of life instead of on the innovative side of life, which, of course, a part of the cost of loneliness is sustainability. If we are talking of living a sustainable life in the future, we cannot be sustainable if we are on the consumption side of life. We have to be on the innovative side of life. But let's leave that. Remember, that is the issue, the key concept of my book on entrepreneurship, where the focus is on how do we transform from being a consumer to being a producer? How do we transform from being an applicant to being an employer, right? So another side of social media is the dangerous side of our perception that is creating an illusion between our reality and our capabilities. So it's making every person to become gluttonous. Okay, we no longer accept nature the way it is from the gift of God. Okay, if you're skinny, you want to be big boned because you saw somebody that is big boned and is a celebrity. Okay, if you're big boned, you want to be skinny because you believe that you saw somebody modeling a cloth that is skinny, and then so we are living an insatiable life, and that is the quality of life that I'm mentioning in the book, that we are never satisfied with what we have. I'm not talking about being complacent. I'm talking about being content while being ambitious. They are two different concepts. And the social media is distorting our perception of the reality. We are talking now about addiction. Okay. Vietnam has now defined, their board of psychology have now defined what they call social media addiction. Okay. And they have the criteria like people who can spend 3 or 4 hours a day in the social media, whether it's gaming or scanning through the news or thinking that something is important, right? So That addiction is a problem. And then a couple of other things that, in as much as we are crazy about social media, we want to have it and so on, do we really know how much we are spending on social media? Have you ever thought about it, how much you're spending from the cost of your cell phone, the time you spend from the same communication, you check on it in email, you check on it in Instagram, you check on it in Twitter, you check on it on WhatsApp, and we become practically less productive the more we are dependent on social media. So it's a lot we can talk about it.
So, from what we've been talking about today, pastors, church members can be lonely. And despite all the semantics on the pulpit or within the church, we are not really being our brothers. We're not really being our brothers keepers. Because if one of the concepts of Christ is, whatsoever you do unto me, you should do unto your brother. If we are not recognizing these factors that are rearing their head up in the church, then we're falling short. And if we're falling short of being our brother's keeper, then loneliness or us not noticing people being lonely is a problem. So how do we cope? That brings me to the question of how can we cope with loneliness?
Well, first of all, Christians are not immune from the social consequences of loneliness. In the contrary, Christians catalyze the consequences. Remember when I explained the quadrant of whom I am, how I want people to see me, how people see me, and how people want to see me. Okay. We all want to be seen as good, exemplary Christians, even when we recognize our deficiencies. Right? Okay. So as Christians, we are not immune to alcoholism, which is a problem of loneliness. It's one of the things that are associated with loneliness. Christians, we are not immune to suicide thoughts. Regardless of the way we look at it, whether we look at suicide thoughts from the point of view that we want Christ to come today, because we are fed up, we want to force him to come down. Okay? We are not immune from the way we handle our health. Okay? I want to give you an example. I ran into a good Christian coming to the clinic not too long ago. So she told me, oh, my appointment is next week, but the doctor, I was called and the doctor wants to see me right away. I don't know why the doctor wants to see me, but I can tell you, my brother, Satan is a liar. Devil is a liar. Okay. I said, amen. But I'm happy you came to see the doctor. Right? She went in to see the doctor, and the doctor was telling she that, listen, I want to send you to the hospital, or you are going to stay here at least for the next 2-3 hours. Your sugar level is too high. You know what she said? Don't worry. It's not me. It's not my body. That is not my diagnosis. I will go home, I'm going to pray, and I'll be fine. But thank God that this doctor understands Nigerian Christianity. Okay. The doctor told her, I know we cannot force a patient to be compliant, but I'm so concerned about your life that I will not let you go until I bring down the sugar. So it became a battle to convince this Christian fellow to accept the reality that you need something to bring down the sugar, right? Now, how am I tying this to social media? Okay, I'm tying it to social media because even as Christians, we see all these miracle healings, and we disconnect between our faith and our reality. That Peter wouldn't have walked on that water if not by faith. And he wouldn't have been known as somebody that is faithful if he didn't take that step of faith. Right?
Right.
So there is that aspect of you as a Christian to take a step of faith to do something. And sometimes we prefer to deal with everything that we like to hear, that we like to see, instead of facing our reality. A part of the problems medical doctors have today with Christians is that even Christians believe more on Google Doctor than the medical doctor. That means they go back and read their symptoms. They go back and ask the pastor if that can be prayed on for them to be well, instead of spending time to take care of their health. I'm not against spending time to pray, but a part of your meditation also should be taking time to do your physical. Okay, put in a little part of what is due for you. Help yourself for God to help you. Well, I know some people may disagree with me. Now, another aspect is the aspect of sleep disorder. Because when I talk about social media now, I'm including television. Lonely people, or loneliness, means that a lot of people spend more time in TV. That means sleeping at odd time, being awake when they're supposed to be sleeping, and sleeping when they're supposed to be awake. That brings about health issues, serious health issues. Okay, the aspect of poor cultural adjustment, particularly for us, the immigrants, we see a lot of negative things, a lot of hate things that we don't seem to like America where we live in. Even when we don't want to go back to where we come from. So we are in that limbo. We are not fully adjusted into American society. And yet, when you go back to Nigeria, Nigerians are asking you, how is Nigeria? You see people who want to leave the country and come here. You find yourself after the third day, you're praying, looking at your watch, looking at your watch and looking at your return ticket when you're leaving, right? Yeah. So you see the dichotomy? This is a consequence of social media, because some of us spend more time only seeing the negative things in American society, American culture, instead of taking our time to get prepared, okay, get education, get into the best of America, believe in ourselves and in our God to become more competitive in the society, and spend our money wisely. Okay, that is that aspect. And in our children, our people in the school, of course, social media affects their grades. Because what you're reading there may not be the right academic thing for you to read and prepare for the exam. Okay. The aspect of aggression. People who spend a lot of time in social media end up being very angry. Why? Because they are not acquiring vocabulary that will allow them to have decent discussion and arguments. So what happens? When somebody disagrees with them, they just use the F language and, use words that will be more provocative instead of being more respectful. Okay. Of course, the aspect of even running away from home in the case of children, because they believe that the gang and the people outside can be better friends and can protect them more than the people in the family. I would say when we talk about dysfunctional families as a result of social media, it extends to dysfunctional society, because we have this disconnect between the fantasies of created in the social media and the realities of our life, which is exactly the same thing as when we talk in English, the grass is not always greener in the other side. So instead of spending your time thinking about how your life will look like compared to what you see in the social media, maybe you spend a little more time to work on your own garden to make it greener. That is the aspect.
Okay. So all these all these aspects which you've just spoken about now are ways in which we have seen loneliness rear its ugly has a part in loneliness. Because like this week, my son was like, he was playing this game, and he's been on it for like 5 hours. You know, and during these holidays, I've noticed the pattern in which he speaks like, oh, I come in, hi dad. Boom, he's disappeared. And I'm like, where is he? You know, then I come and see him, he's like, pick. So I looked at him, I said, have you read a book? He says, nope. I said, why? I'm on holiday. I said, okay, you're on holiday. That's nice. But have you read a book? You've been playing are you not tired? No. I'm playing with my friends. You're playing what? I'm playing a game. So I took the game from him. I took the console from him, put the console away, and just left him to see what he would do. Do you know that this chap had withdrawal symptoms? All the things that you were calling aggression, he became snappy, like this, just because of the fact that the game was taking, and I could see him withdrawing. And this is someone that he would engage you. He's very engaging. But all of a sudden he started floating away, and I like, And this is what really made me to write about loneliness, you know, or bring up this topic. And it's really crazy because he floated away to the left.
And yet, every member of the family
is in the house.
I think
you understand. Okay. But he's
just more frustrated that the people playing with him from outside the house.
Yes.
Okay. You know he's concerned, and I want you to understand this with empathy. Okay? His concern is that his friends are going to be thinking that he's being abused in his own family because he does not have the freedom to play as many hours as they are playing. Wow. So it's a serious social issue that we need to deal with delicately and have a lot of communication. And as a parent, what I say first is, how often do we as parents shut down from the family after long days, hours of work, just because we want to see Arsenal play against Chelsea?
Okay.
So it's an addiction that all of us are involved in. It's a very, very interesting concept. And the only way to work on it is, when you ask me about how do we cope with loneliness, the first step is identifying why we are lonely. Why are we lonely? If we have people around us, why are we lonely? If we complain of even time to take our shower, to do our laundry, to call my grandpa and say, Grandpa, how are you doing? And yet we complain of loneliness. Okay. So that is step one. Step two is to realize that loneliness is a feeling, not a fact. Okay. Because your environment, you may not be lonely. You're not alone. It's you feeling like that you are lonely. Okay. But as Christians, this is the one that I consider very challenging. As Christians, do we really practice forgiveness?
Go ahead. I think we're going to take a break. And I think that when we come back, you can wrap it up on how to cope with loneliness and give your closing remarks. I think we've spoken extensively from the concepts down to the characteristics of typography to the social media and its acts on loneliness. So I think when we come back from our short break, we wrap it up. It's really a pleasure talking with you, and we'll be back after a few. Thank you.
Providing unique tea blends that aid in treatment of ailments such as diabetes, cancer, blood pressure, insomnia, high cholesterol, and others.
In addition to our health and welfare line of tea, Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Hi. I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
Well, before I left my campsite, I was putting out my fire, and out of nowhere, Smokey Bear showed up and hugged me?
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. He likes it when people correctly put out their campfires. He's pretty big on wildfire prevention. He's just letting you know you did good with a hug. He's a hugger.
I just got a bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update!
All right, I'm gonna let you go now. I've got a lot of ranger stuff to do. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Sponsored by...
As an 18-year-old, I let my mistakes kind of take over my life. I was 0.5 credits away from completing high school, and I didn't do it.
10 years later, at age 28, Jackie finished her high school diploma.
When I found out that I was pregnant, I know that I had to do something for myself if I wanted to make her a better person and provide a better life for her. My family never stopped pushing for me to be better because they knew what I could become and who I could become as a person. My support team is amazing. The educational director, my sister, and even my 7-year-old daughter has just been more than the support that I could ask for. I've been given an opportunity, and I'm just thankful for it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her.
Oh, sweetie, this is gonna happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge.
Gotta get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend.
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Let the living shout hallelujah. Let the blessed of God, the choosing generation, the favored of God, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, join me as we bless the name of God this day. Amen. Adonai, my provider, Jehovah Nissi, you are my help. Oh, Shalom, you are my peace. Jehovah Shammah, you are here to bless me. Oh, you are here to bless me. You are here to answer me. Even before I call, you answer 7 times. You are here to fill my cup to overflowing. You are here to anoint me to do exploits. When we gather in your name. In your presence, there's fullness of joy. When you come, your people are set free. We here rejoice because you are here. Adonai, my provider, Jehovah Nissi, you are my help. Shalom, you are my peace. Jehovah Shammah, I know you are here. Adonai, my provider, Jehovah Nissi, you are my oh, Shalom, Jehovah Shammah, you are here to bless me. Oh, you are here to bless me. You are here to hear my cry. You are here to save me. We say welcome, oh welcome. You are here to save our souls, to heal the sick, to cleanse your people, to enrich the poor. You're here to heal our land. Open doors and bless your people. We rejoice in your presence, for we know you are here. Adonai, my provider, Jehovah Nissi, you are my help. Shalom, you are my peace. Jehovah Shammah, I know you are here. Adonai, my provider, oh Jehovah Nissi, you are my help. Shalom, you are my peace. I mean Jehovah Shammah, you are here to bless me. Oh, you are here to anoint me. You are here to refresh me. You are here to revive your work. I know you are here to do something new in somebody's life. You are here to promote someone. You are here to bless someone. You are here to do exploits. You are here to increase your people. I hear the sounds of abundance today. You are here to do something glorious, gracious, so great. You are here to do something wonderful. Hey, you are here to bless me. You bless all that concerns my life. Because you are the ancient of days. If you are for me, nobody can be against me. When you open a door, nobody can shut the door. Hallelujah. It's time to bless the name of the Lord for his goodness and mercy unto his children.
Thank you once again for joining Maximum Impact. We're on Non-Fictional Radio. I'm with Dr. Egesionu and Pastor Israel. So, because of lack of time, let's just have a quick conclusion. We're speaking about loneliness, and we spoke about the concepts, we spoke about the characteristics, we spoke about the types, but we didn't finish about the types of loneliness. Can you, Dr. Egesionu, kind of wrap up about the types of loneliness that we can experience or people do experience?
One of the types that is interesting that we didn't talk about is no time for me, loneliness. There are situations where we think that we should be doing something at every moment of our life. Okay. And at the end, when we find out that life is not just all about multitasking, that transforms into loneliness and anxiety. Okay, so that's a type. Another type is untrustworthy friends. When you just feel like all what you remember about your friends is that they're never there for you when you need them. They are lying to you. Okay. But my question has always been, how bad really are your friends, and still they are your friends? Or is it about your perception of those friends of yours? Okay. And maybe this one is not very common with many Africans. the no pets loneliness.
The what type of thing?
No pets, animals in the house.
Okay, no pets animals.
Okay. You know that there are people who cannot live without their pets.
Correct.
Okay, so we may not have that issue, a lot of us, particularly from Africa, but for our American friends, that's an issue.
Okay.
That is why if a pet dies, people go into serious agony, just as if they lost a human being. That does not mean that they don't like human beings. No, it's just that the culture created a perception that there is a role the pet plays in the family different from the role human beings play. And when there is no pet, that can be a problem. And of course, the one I mentioned earlier that I'm yet to mention, where is my phone? Loneliness. Okay, when your phone is not ringing, when your text message is not coming in, what do? You pick it up, you start reading what you've read before, and you cannot just let go that little equipment in your hand. That creates a lot of loneliness.
So we were talking about the next aspect we were talking about was the social media and loneliness. What is the impact of social media towards loneliness?
Well, it starts directly from what I mentioned in the book, Quality of Life and the Total Quality. Okay. There is a direct relationship between loneliness and the quality of life. One, when we look at it, measuring the social and the family relationship. Okay. And regrettably, I have to make this confession that most of us, the men, are more perpetrators of this than victims. That we come home, we want to watch TV, or we want to check our mails, or we want to touch our cell phone. I was in a very funny situation with my brother-in-law that I flippantly got him into trouble. We were watching a soap opera, you know, the telenovelas of the Mexican channels. And I asked him, why do men spend so much time watching TV? So he said, well, if what you're seeing in the TV is better than what you're seeing in the house. And only for him to turn around to find out that his fiancée was there. Wow. So that was a problem. Wow. you see how social media can cause social problems, because that deep inside him, he really believed that the fantasy of what he was seeing on the TV was better than what he was seeing, and he didn't know when he verbalized it, and then that was a serious problem with his girlfriend. The aspect of social roles and activities in the house, okay, the role of a man, the role of a woman, particularly if it's a culture where gender matters. Okay. The social media is trying to show us a different face of gender role in the family. Okay. And what about relationship with our neighbors? Is social media an enabler, or is preventing us from socializing with our neighbors? The psychological well-being of man, the time we're supposed to be resting, the time and what is engaging our imaginations compared to what we are seeing and what we really want to be. And the last aspect that I want to mention, I know we are running out of time, is the clash between religion, teachings in the Bible, and the paradigm change that we are bombarded every day from the social media. Okay. This is creating a lot of conflict, and that conflict, people react to it in different ways. Okay. Either being a hypocrite, see something else in social media and talk about something else as a Christian, or vice versa.
Okay, that's very good. All right, so we'll come to the last part, the last 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to talk about how to cope with loneliness, and I'm going to give Pastor Israel 5 minutes on how to talk about his experience with loneliness as he's a pastor, and I'll take it from there and wrap it up. So what's your concluding remarks? Yes, Dr. Hebuje, what's your concluding remarks about how to cope with loneliness?
Well, I mentioned the 3 things already before we left, and the last word I was saying before we went on break was practicing forgiveness. Christians teach forgiveness, we don't practice it. Okay. We tell our brothers, we tell every person, I've forgiven you, and yet 2 weeks later, when a similar thing happens, you go back to where you were, right? That creates a lot of loneliness because the time you're spending being angry about something somebody did to you is the time you're spending being lonely, period. There are no other definitions about that as long as loneliness is concerned. The aspect of embracing people who are different from you. Okay. And the challenge in the case of Christianity is not on race difference. It's not about I'm Yoruba, I'm Igbo, I'm Hausa, I'm black, or I'm white. It's about the ideological differences. How do we really see people that have different sexual orientation? How do we really see people who vote differently from the way we vote? How do we really see people who raise up their children differently from the way we were raised up or the way we think children are supposed to be raised up? So coping with difference can help us a lot. The aspect of notice yourself defecting thoughts. When you're distracted, what are you thinking about? What are those things that are the trigger points of your thoughts? Okay. Is it because you like a particular brand of car? Is it because you like a particular club and that your club is not winning, or people around you don't like the same club and the things? The thought of mind, your frame mind. The aspect of connecting to meaningful ways of living inwardly and outwardly, particularly when it's job and profession related. A lot of us these days, because of the need to manifest social progress, economic independence, are even getting into careers that we really don't like. So we are not really having job satisfaction. Okay. And a lot of it is the impact of the society or the media. Okay. So how do we reconcile that reality? And of course, my last 2 points that I suggest about loneliness is anticipation. Anticipate that there are times in life when it's okay to be alone. It's okay not to be talking. It's okay not to be socializing. It's okay not to be angry. It's okay just to be okay, right? So therefore, at that moment, you think about kindness goes a long way. Start practicing kindness. Do something that you're not used to doing. Call your neighbor one day and ask him, what are you up to? Go around and help him cut his grass. Find where the elderly is. Say hello to somebody you don't know. Okay. Stop the fear of thinking that human beings are dangerous. Okay. And what is not dangerous is your social media. I will make a joke to you. Whenever I give my students a teamwork, the problem is they don't want to share their cell phone numbers. They don't want to share their emails. And what do I tell them? You don't want to share your email or your cell phone number with somebody you know you're going to spend 12 weeks, 15 weeks with. But you go to club and you give to somebody your phone number and take that person home the same day. Ironically. Okay. So the bottom line is learn the arts of courtesy and kindness to people. And of course, say no to loneliness. Just refuse to be alone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gabriel. That was very powerful. Now I give the remaining 5 minutes to Pastor Israel. We've been talking about loneliness. As a pastor, I know you must come into situations in which you can relate to this topic. So let's hear your thoughts about what Dr. Ihabuchi has said and the ways you cope with this aspect we're talking about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obi, and thank you also, Dr. Ibomuche. I was actually watching the program on my laptop computer before I came in. I was impressed when you brought out the cultural component of loneliness, meaning that what people call loneliness is objective. Or what I mean by that is what you call loneliness may not be what I call loneliness. In a country where people that are more communal. So when people are alone, when when people move in, when there are not a lot of people around, they could feel or think about loneliness. Unlike in a country where three is a crowd. So in such kind of country, loneliness has a different slight meaning. And you also say something like, somebody could have people around and be lonely. And somebody could be alone and not be lonely. Because loneliness is more of a perception. So based on those definitions, I want to contribute that I want to agree to the fact that loneliness is a perception, is something you perceive. When Jesus was about to die on the cross, he says, my Father, why have you forsaken me? So it was the Father's absence that means loneliness for him. In the midst of those crowd, the Father's presence, absence, was very felt. So on that note, I want to say that you could have people and be lonely. And I want to repeat, you could be alone and not be lonely. So loneliness is not only a perception, it's a condition. It is like depression, which could also be an offspring of loneliness. And depression is not just what happens to you, but how you perceive it or how you feel about it. But I have this scripture I want to give to us before I round up. And that is in Hebrews 13. 4 and 5, where God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. For me, this scripture is an antidote. It is a cure to loneliness. God says, I will not leave you, I will not forsake you. Now, living and forsaking, there are two different things. Why did he say that? He said those words because, one, he will not physically leave us. He's always there. Two, he will not forsake us. Forsaken means, you know you could be married, or a couple can be together in the same bed, in the same room, but they're not together. They're separated. So that one was already left and thinking of something else. So that's where forsaken comes in. So forsaken is a state of abandonment, a state of neglect, a state of, even though I'm there, I'm not there. So God says, one, I will not physically leave you. Two, I will not abandon you. I will not neglect you. I will not forsake you. So I want you to have that concept that when men leave you, Bible says, even when your parents desert you, I will take care of you. So I want to leave us with the words that God is always there. He does not leave us. Actually, God is like that static position that is here. This is my phone on this. So now, if I'm here, I'm going to say, oh, this is far away from me. But in the real note, it didn't move. It's still where it is. I moved. So God does not move. So when we walk away from him, we say, oh, God is far. God is not far. He is where he was yesterday, today, and forevermore. We just have to come back to him. And I pray that we have that knowledge and know that God does not leave us. Even when everyone leaves us, we should know that he's there. And if he's there, he can always restore relationship, restore money, restore job, restore joy, restore anyone that has left us. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Israel. Thank you very much, Dr. Yahabujo.
Thank you.
It was very great to hear from you and listen to you. Everyone struggles at some point in their life with a form or bout of loneliness. Whether you're going through something today or tomorrow, you should always remember that God has made a provision in which he can help you, give you hope, and give you strength. And I would just add to what Pastor Israel said. I would go to a psalm which I believe everybody should look at that and always try to use it as an impact in their life. Psalm 25, verse 16, and it says, Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted. God will turn to you in your point of need of your loneliness, and he will look after you, no matter what the situation is. Always remember, God never left. We did do the leaving. And on that aspect, for all those who are lonely, remember the verse, come to me, all ye that are lonely and afflicted, and I will give you rest. Only one person can grant you rest, and that person is Jesus Christ, who is the author and savior of our life. And if we continue to use these concepts and apply these concepts with the way and the coping mechanisms which Dr. Ihabuche has brought us, I think that we can have a sound foundation of how to cope with loneliness, how to understand loneliness, how to identify loneliness, and how to apply ourselves to those that are lonely. Because at the end of the day, we are our brother's keeper. And on that note, I'd like to thank once again Dr. Ihabuche for coming.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Pastor Israel for coming too. Thank you, sir. And this is Non-Fictional Radio. This is Maximum Impact. I am Dr. Okonkwo signing off, and I'll speak to you next week. Thank you very much, and God bless.